Diligence now is, so we use the word diligence. Sometimes we use the word joyful effort. And the reason that some people translate it as joyful effort is because the real kind of more deeper meaning of diligence, according to Buddhist philosophy, is actually enthusiasm. It's joyful effort. So, the word that we translate from Tibetan texts into English is literally diligence. But there's a famous quote from Shantideva in The Way of the Bodhisattva where he says, what is diligence? It's being enthusiastic about wholesome or virtuous practices. So, from that perspective, you can kind of see how he's reframing diligence, not just as kind of stubbornly or persistently kind of pushing yourself to do something that you think is right, but actually trying to become enthusiastic about it. If you're enthusiastic about something, you don't have to force yourself to do it. For example, if you're enthusiastic about your meditation practice, you'll get up in the morning and be excited to do it. Just like if you were getting up in the morning and you were excited to go on a trip with your family, or you're excited to go on that bike ride with your friends, or whatever your morning activity might be. And the problem, the reason why I think a lot of us have trouble getting into that rhythm of daily practice is because we haven't really gotten the enthusiasm yet. And that's kind of where this kind of idea of diligence as enthusiasm, I find really helpful. So rather than just trying to convince yourself that you should do it, you should convince yourself of the benefits of it, and then maybe you'll get some more enthusiasm, So that's kind of the approach of a lot of this text. So coming back to Gampopa's actual text, then he gives a lot of categories at the beginning, like a lot of Tibetan texts and also classical Indian Buddhist texts. You'll read it and they'll give a really huge outline. They'll say, the perfection of diligence is summarized as sevenfold, blah, 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 go into all these different categories. I'm going to not go into too much of that because what often happens at these things is people, everyone kind of wants to write down every single word, and then it just becomes confusing. So I think I should just kind of cover the main points without saying there are 7 points, and in the 7 points, there's 4 subpoints and all that kind of stuff. It just, especially in this short of a timeline, it becomes a mess. So let's just talk. Almost every chapter in this book about the perfection starts off with talking about the drawbacks on the absence, or the drawbacks of not having diligence, and the advantages of having diligence. So those are the first 2 sections of this text. So now in the text, it says that, I'm just going to read a short passage here and then we'll talk about it a little bit. To explain the reflections on the drawbacks of its absence, its meaning diligence, and the benefits of its practice, even though possessing the qualities of generosity and so forth, that's talking about the other perfections. A person devoid of diligence will waste their time. When time is wasted, virtue is not accomplished, there is no ability to benefit others, and enlightenment is not attained. So even if you have done some practice of generosity and some practice of ethical discipline, of patience, of meditative concentration, and trying to develop wisdom through studying text or vipassana, analytical type of meditations and so forth, if you don't have diligence, then those things are going to be kind of powerless. If you're not actually applying yourself diligently and with enthusiasm toward developing those, then you're not going to make any progress in them. Just understanding what diligence is, or just understanding what wisdom is, or having an intellectual understanding of selflessness isn't going to get you enlightened. It's diligent practice of those things, which is what's going to lead you actually towards enlightenment. So that's the point here. So it says, possession of diligence, the opposite of wasting time. And another thing that's a little bit interesting here, that this translator has chosen to translate the word laziness as wasting time. But the word literally is laziness. And I think maybe he's just trying to avoid like a kind of maybe negative kind of word, or a word that we have like negative associations with. But anyway, saying diligence is the opposite of laziness is what the author is saying, Gampopa. And, as he goes through in the text, he talks about how, about 3 kinds of laziness and how to overcome those 3 kinds of laziness. So we're going to get into that in a minute. So there are a lot of just quotes from texts here, and I don't feel like it's necessarily all that helpful to just read like 17 quotes from different texts and say that this author said this, and in this sutra, the Buddha said this, and so forth. But I'll read a few of these things just for a basis for conversation here. So basically, these are just kind of like phrases for diligence. So in the Ornament of Mahayana Sutras, it says, through diligence, someone goes beyond the perishable composite and is liberated. The perishable composite is a technical Buddhist term, which means it's sometimes also translated as the view of the transitory collection. And what that means, is a technical term, is that your idea of a self or yourself, your I, is kind of just an idea or an imputation of your mind, which is based upon a bunch of other things which themselves are constantly changing. They are perishable or transitory. So like your body is one of those things. It's constantly changing. It's never the same. Like your body of 2 years ago is not your body now, and so forth. And if you go deeper into that, your body of 1 millisecond ago is not your body now. Like it's gone. It's in the past. It's no longer exists in terms of subtle impermanence and so forth. So it's saying basically that your body is constantly changing, but you identify it as me. Your mind is constantly changing, but you identify it as me. Your feelings of likes and dislikes and neutrality and so forth are constantly changing, but you still identify them as me. Your perceptions of this is this and that's that are constantly changing, yet you still identify them as me. And your emotional states are constantly changing, but you still identify them as me. So that's what is the view of the transitory collection, is that you believe that there's some truly existing kind of permanent, singular, independently existing I or me. But when you look for that, all you find are these things that are constantly changing, that never stay still for a moment. So what he's saying here is, through diligence, someone goes beyond the perishable composite and is liberated. The way to be liberated, according to Buddhism, is to overcome that idea or that belief that there is some enduring, truly existing I, other than just these things that you're basing that idea on. And so that's what he's saying here. If you have diligence, you'll be able to overcome that, and that is what liberates you. So again, in that same text, just continuing on, it says that you'll attain Buddhahood. Through diligence, one will become supremely enlightened as a Buddha. So then again, in this Questions of Sagaramati Sutra, the Buddha says, ultimately, totally pure, perfect enlightenment is not that difficult for people who practice diligence. Why is this, Sagaramati? Whoever has diligence has enlightenment. Basically, all he's saying is that it's not that hard to get enlightened if you just keep at it, if you're enthusiastic about it. And so that's the problem, is people don't usually follow through. They don't follow through, so they don't actually make it there. At another point in Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva, he says, there's nothing in the world that isn't easy if you just get used to it. And that's what we're doing when we practice meditation. You're just keeping at it. It becomes easy. It becomes familiar. So anyway, that's the idea here.